Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Vallabha Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yasoda Nandana Yamuna Tiyara Banacha Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Vandana Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Tiyara Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Yamuna Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Tiyara Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Tiyara Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yasoda Nandana Rajana Vandana Yamuna Tiyara Banachari Vrindavan, Kunja Vihari, ādma-vañcakaḥ, Kunja Vihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivardhari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha, Girivardhari, Yasoda Nandana, Vajjana Vrindavan, Sodanandana, Vajjana Vrindavan, Yamuna Tira, Vanacha, Yamuna Tira, Vanacha. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya, Austere Sita Sri Sriman, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya, Austere Sita Sri Sriman, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Gauri Vaishnavita Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki, Jagannath Subhadra Balaram Ki, Krishna Balaram Ki, Sri Sri Radha Shama Sundar Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. So today we are reading from the 10th canto, 63rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, text 41. It's up there on the board, right? Okay. First we will do each word at a time, and then we will repeat the verse. Deva. Wait, I forgot. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 41. Deva-dattam, imam, labdhvā, nṛ-lokam, ajitendriyaḥ, yo, nādriyeta, tvat-pādau, śocyo, hi, ātma-vañcakaḥ, deva-dattam imam labdhvā, nṛ-lokam ajitendriyaḥ, yo nādriyeta tvat-pādau, śocyo hi ātma-vañcakaḥ, deva-dattam imam labdhvā, nṛ-lokam ajitendriyaḥ, yo nādriyeta tvat-pādau, śocyo hi ātma-vañcakaḥ, deva-dattam imam labdhvā, nṛ-lokam ajitendriyaḥ, yo nādriyeta tvat-pādau, śocyo hi ātma-vañcakaḥ, deva-dattam imam labdhvā, nṛ-lokam ajitendriyaḥ, yo nādriyeta tvat-pādau, śocyo hi ātma-vañcakaḥ. Repeat. Deva-dattam imam labdhvā, Vaishnavis? Finished? Okay, we'll read the word for word. Who wants to be a vañcakaḥ? Raise your hand if you want to be one. Uh-oh. We better read the first. Deva, by the Supreme Lord. Dattam, given. Imam, this. Labdhvā, attaining. nṛ, of human beings. Lokam, the world. Ajita, uncontrolled. Indriyaḥ, his senses. Yah, who. Nādriyeta, will not honor. Tat, your. Pādau, feet. Sa, he. Śocyaḥ, pitiable. He, indeed, atma of himself. And here's the word, vañcakaḥ, a cheater. Have to be careful, I ask trick questions so that people have to pay attention before they answer them. So now who wants to be a vañcakaḥ? And the people who do don't usually say yes, right? Okay. The verse in English. One who has attained this human form of life as a gift from God, yet who fails to control his senses and honor your feet, is surely to be pitied, for he is only cheating himself. Purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Lord Śiva here condemns those who refuse to engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. We'll comment on all these verses when we get to the 44th verse. We'll spend the most time on the 44th verse because we're all for that one. Okay, the next ones I'll just read it through. Yastram vishraje marcha atmanam priya ishvaram viparyendriyartham visham ati amritam jagam. Yah, who, Twam, you, Vishrajate rejects, Marja, mortal man, Atmanam, his true self, Priyam, dearmost, Ishvaram, Lord, Viparyaya, which are just opposite, Indriya Artha, of sense objects, Artham, for the sake, Visham, poison, Ati, he eats, Amritam, nectar, Tyajan, avoiding. Translation: that mortal who rejects you, his truth self, dearmost friend and Lord, for the sake of sense objects, whose nature is just the opposite, refuses nectar and instead consumes poison. Translation: that mortal who rejects you, his true self, dearmost friend and Lord, for the sake of sense objects, whose nature is just the opposite, refuses nectar and instead consumes poison. Purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. The person described above is pitiable because he rejects that which is actually dear, the Lord, and accepts that which is not dear and is ungodly, temporary sense gratification, which leads to suffering and bewilderment. Text 43. Aham brahmata vibhuta Munayash Chamalashayah Sarvatmana Prapanastram Atmanam Preshta Ishvaram. And now text 44. No, sorry, we'll read them word for word, and then text 44. Aham, I, Brahma, Ata, and also, Vibhudaha, the demigods, Munaya, the sages, Cha, and Amala, pure, Ashaya, whose consciousness, Sarva Atmana, wholeheartedly, Prapana, surrendered, Tvam, unto you, Atmanam, the self, Preshtam, the dearmost, Ishvaram, the Lord. Translation: I, Lord Brahma, and the other demigods, and the pure-minded sages have all surrendered wholeheartedly unto you, our dearmost self and Lord. Text 44. Tam cha jakstiti udyanta hetum samam prasantam surid atmadevam anyam ekam jagat atmaketam bhava-pavargaya bhajam devam. Word for word. Tam, him. Tva, you. Jagat, of the universe. Stiti, of the maintenance. Udaya, the rise. Anta, and the demise. Hetum, the cause. Samam, equiposed. Prasantam, perfectly at peace. Surid, the friend. Atma, self. Daivam, the worshipful Lord. Anyam, without a second. Ekam, unique. Jagat, of the worlds. Atma, of all souls. Ketam, the shelter. Bhava, of material life. Apavargaya, for the cessation. Bhajama, let us worship. Devan, the Supreme Lord. Translation: let us worship you, the Supreme Lord, to be free from material life. You are the maintainer of the universe and the cause of its creation and demise. Equipoised and perfectly at peace, you are the true friend, self and worshipful Lord. You are one without a second, the shelter of all the world and all souls. Purport by the followers of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Sridhar Swami states that the Lord is the true friend because he sets one's proper intelligence into motion. If one desires to know the truth about God and the soul, Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti both emphasize that the term bhava-pavargaya indicates the highest liberation of pure love of Godhead, characterized by unalloyed devotion, all service unto the Lord. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti also explains that the Supreme Lord is samam, perfectly objective and balanced, whereas other living beings, having an incomplete grasp of reality, cannot be perfectly objective. Those who surrender unto the Lord also become fully objective by taking shelter of his supreme consciousness. These are some interesting things here. The story starts out with Usha and Aniruddha, that Usha had the dream that she was with her dearmost Aniruddha, and she asked her friend Chitralekha to draw pictures, and when she got to Krishna, she was a little bashful, and when she got to Pradumya, the father of Aniruddha, more bashful. Aniruddha, she goes, yes, that's the one. So Chitralekha brought him back, and they had this fantastic love affair, and then it became obvious that Usha was involved with a man. And so Banasura had, of course, prayed to Lord Śiva, I have 1,000 arms and I want somebody who can fight me. And Lord Śiva says, are you sure? I give you someone, but you might not be happy with him. So Banasura burst in and he found Usha and Aniruddha, and it appeared like they were in trouble. Because after all, Banasura had 1,000 arms and all the assistants, and they captured them. And then, of course, Banasura was a great devotee of Lord Śiva, so he was pretty well protected, pretty well connected. but maybe not the best connected. Because Lord Krishna came along with his army, and Śiva sent out the Shiva Dwara, the extreme heat. Pretty hard to conquer that. But Krishna sent the Narayana Dwara. As Prabhupada says, extreme heat is austerity, but extreme cold is just miserable. And so it defeated. And so both Banasura and Shiva had to surrender to Krishna. What do they say? If you can't beat them, join them? This is a good idea, because many of us try to play God. We think, I will be Krishna's competitor. And this can turn out to be a bad idea, even for the great persons. And Krishna usually makes them think that their plan is working. Like, wow, look, Shiva's protecting Banasura, and Banasura captured Usha and Aniruddha. They don't have a chance. Krishna did this when Brahma hid all the cows and the cowherd boys. So Krishna's running around looking like he's confused. Because if you want to play a counter trick on someone, the first thing you do is make them think that their trick worked. So Brahma thought, look, my trick worked. I was able to trick Krishna by hiding the cows and the cowherd boys. But Krishna, with just a fragment of his energy, as it says in Bhagavad Gita, I pervade and support these universes with just a fragment of my energy, he manifests all those cows and cowherd boys, and Brahma became confused. So in the same way here, Shiva is telling these 4 verses to Banasura to get him to catch the clue to surrender to Krishna. And something we see by these verses is it gives us an idea about, we'll call it cost to benefit and risk to reward. We look in verse 31. The person who fails to control his senses is surely pitied, for he is only cheating himself. I'll discuss a few things today in one lecture Prabhupada gave in Hawaii. It was the 6th canto, 1st chapter, verse 13 and 14. And he says, you think that you are cheating Krishna and Guru, but Guru and Krishna will not be cheated. You will be cheated. So the person who fails to control his senses, this looks like it's a big risk for a negative reward. And the cost is heavy. You're going to cheat yourself. And the benefit is also negative. So this one doesn't look good. The person who rejects you, he consumes poison instead of nectar. This also looks like a bad idea. The risk is so big and the reward is little. So Śiva goes on here to present something else. It says in the beginning of verse 44, let us worship you, the Supreme Lord, to be free from material life. Because this is the problem. People are stuck in material life. Now we can get some intelligence. Intelligence means that we have the power to analyze things in their proper perspective. But the trouble is that if you're involved in material life, what would be the basic aspect different in material life approach compared to spiritual? Well, in material life, matter is the most important object. So the senses become controlled by matter, and the mind becomes controlled by the senses, and the intelligence becomes controlled by the mind, and the soul is lost. This is the problem, as Krishna says in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where we're talking about this material life, where the senses are contemplating the matter. He says that while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment to them. From such attachment, lust arises. From such lust, anger develops. From anger, one goes into delusion. From delusion, memory is bewildered, and then intelligence is lost. Here's the problem. When intelligence is lost, you don't have to decipher. Then you follow into the material world. This again looks like a very poor cost-to-benefit ratio and a very high risk to a negative reward. Each of those gets worse. While contemplating the objects of the senses, you develop attachment. This is why Krishna says in 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita that we must curb this symbol of sin in the very beginning. So spiritual life will be just the opposite, that the senses are above the matter, and the mind controls the senses, and the intelligence is controlling the mind, and the intelligence is in contact with the supersoul, who is connected to Krishna through his own realization, through Guru, through Shastras, and through other devotees. So this is why we want to be free from the material life, because we see the big difference. And in the purport here to this verse, we see that Sridhar Swami is saying that Krishna is the true friend because he sets one's proper intelligence into motion. The problem with the intelligence not being in the right motion is it is controlled by the modes of material nature. Everyone is searching for some kind of happiness. But the happiness in the mode of ignorance, the person just wants to blot out. They want to get drunk and go to sleep. They want to forget. They want to be able to ignore. The goal of the person in the mode of ignorance is to get so intoxicated that they don't remember tomorrow, they won't remember yesterday. This is the goal. This is the condition that they want to be. The happiness in the mode of ignorance is poison in the beginning and poison in the end. People think the happiness in the mode of passion is the best because it's pleasure in the beginning. You get it right away, that's all that counts, isn't it? But it's poison in the end. You get the reward very quickly, but the cost is much higher later on. You know, you don't want to go buy a product in the store and they say, don't worry, you just sign your name and the bill will come later. This is what we do in the mode of passion. Yes, I'll just enjoy and I won't know what will come later. Because the problem is when we get stuck in any one of these senses, is that we continue to get dragged by that condition. That from the lust and the attachment, we lose our self-control. And if you lose control of your mind, you lose control of your life. So, as Prabhupada says in this lecture, he says that how to make advancement. He says we should perform tapasya. He says like in ancient ages, they would put the fire all around and the people would sit in the middle of summer. And in the middle of winter, they would dunk in the cold water. It doesn't sound very comfortable, but this is tapasya. And he says that Lord Chaitanya is so kind in this age that he gives us the tapasya of chanting the holy names. But we have some other tapasyas we follow. Not that they are there to punish us, but the tapasyas are there so that we can get out of material life and into spiritual life. Because basically the difference in the pleasure of the mode of goodness is the person is trying to do something helpful for others and trying to do something that is nurturing. And the transcendental pleasure is they're trying to serve Krishna. So in this mood, he says the tapasya in this age, that we have to remember that we may be attracted to the material energy. Man is attracted to woman, woman is attracted to man. This is nothing surprising. This goes on. He says, but tapasya means that even if we are attracted, we do not do. We do not have to act on this attachment. The sooner that we pull our mind away, as Krishna says in the 25th verse of the 6th chapter, that from whenever and wherever the mind wanders, we pull it back under the control of the self. We put it on a leash, like this one here, and we pull it back. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So even if we're attracted, we do not do. It has to remember that. At the time of initiation, we made a promise that we would not have illicit sex. Then he mentions the others. He mentions intoxication, meat eating, gambling. But as Prabhupada mentions later on, the real problem is sex life. We have a book about brahmacharya in Krishna consciousness. We don't seem to need a book about how not to gamble or how not to eat meat. Prabhupada says whether you're a human being or a bird or a fish or a fly, the real problem is sex life. Because once you become attached, it's like they call it hooked. They put the bait in for the fish and he grabs that hook, then he's stuck. So we don't want to become stuck. This is the material life. And Prabhupada reminds us, it's a very stern way. He says, at the time of initiation, we promised, I will not have illicit sex. We promised before the deities, before the fire, before the spiritual master, before the Vaishnavas, and we make that promise. And he says that these things may be difficult, but it is possible by practice. But we must practice with determination. And what does determination mean? Determination means the same thing as deliberation. Like Krishna says in the 43rd verse of the 3rd chapter, that with deliberate spiritual intelligence, we must pull the mind away from matter and pull it back to the self. This is Buddhi Yoga. And determination means that we have determined what is the best course of action. With the purified intelligence, we are able to analyze what is the best course of action. And we have determined that as material activities, what is the cost to benefit, what is the risk to reward. We have seen in the mode of ignorance that we're very stuck. We've seen that in the mode of passion, that once we act on this, that we're stuck for as long as it's going to take us. It's like you're saying, well, I'll get on the flight from here to New York, and in the middle of the flight I can change my mind. No, you can't change your mind till the flight is done. Free will is there, but at certain points we give up free will to take the ride. And this is the material life that we want to stay free from. Prabhupada says that Krishna can help us, but we practice with determination. We have determined what is the nature of material activities, what is the negative effect, and we have determined that if I engage in spiritual activities, Krishna will relieve me from the pangs of material existence. Prabhupada says in this lecture that we must not only worship the deity, but we must pray to Krishna to save me from the pitfalls of Maya. We make a decision to engage in Krishna's service, and we make a decision to give up the things like illicit sex. But is this something we only do once? Or it seems that we have to keep reminding ourselves that I am a spirit soul, I am engaging in Krishna's service, I will not fall into illicit sex or into other activities. We have to keep praying. It's not like the fan, you unplug it and it's gone. Did that happen for anyone here? You decided, I will have no more material desires, and they went away? Raise your mind if that happens. But they can diminish. You plug the fan out, and it doesn't stop immediately, but it starts slowing down. So this working intelligence can come, as Sridhar Swami was saying here, that this working intelligence, the proper intelligence is set in motion if one desires to know the truth about God and the soul. A lot of it depends if we desire Krishna more than the material activities, then we will make progress. And if we don't, we will be stuck in the mire of material existence. So Krishna will set that intelligence into motion if we take shelter of him. Krishna mentions this in many verses in the Bhagavad Gita. He mentions that everyone follows my path in all respects, but as they surrender to me, I reward them. So this is how we get our rewards. It should be obvious. If you want to buy things that are 10 rupees, if you give them 100, you get 10. If you give them 1,000, you get 100. So as we surrender, Krishna rewards us. In the 14th verse of the 7th chapter, Krishna goes a little farther. He says, this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is very difficult to transcend. Sounds like we're in trouble, right? Just like we're all in trouble. It looks like Usha and Aniruddha were in trouble, but Krishna came to save them. But he says, but those who surrender unto me, it becomes easy. Prabhupada explains in the purport that this is like the ocean of miseries shrinks into the amount of water that you would have in a calf print. So rather than on our own trying to swim across this ocean of material activities, of material life, that we should surrender to Krishna, and he helps us and he makes it easier for us. Just like Prabhupada is saying, that we practice, but we practice with determination. So we have to remember that determination, that we've added up what is the result of material activities. They simply make us, what was it, one verse here it mentioned. That you get poison instead of nectar. We've seen the result of this. And we've seen that more we act as matter in material life, the more we end up in that matter. And the more we act in spiritual life, the more we end up in spiritual consciousness. Krishna goes a little farther in the 10th verse of the 10th chapter, where he says, Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the intelligence by which they come to me. So this intelligence is discriminating, understanding things in their proper perspective. When I do the material activities, I end up in ignorance or in passion. I either end up in the material pool or in great attachment. When I do the spiritual activities, I experience eternity, knowledge, and bliss, and start to feel Krishna's presence more through his chanting. This is this intelligence we are talking about. And we may not have this intelligence easily, but Krishna can give it to us. We may think that we're incomplete. We may think that we're not much. It may be true. Krishna also says that he preserves what we have and he carries what we lack. We may not be much. I know I'm not much. I was alone in South Africa, and I was only 19 years old, and the Swami had left me alone, and I was in a big debt there, and I didn't know who would kill me first, the Africans because they were mad at whites, or the whites because I was living in a non-white area. And I was doomed, because I had nothing going on, unqualified, and all the stacks are against me. But Prabhupada wrote a letter that said, I made all these decisions because there was no one to ask. And when the letter came from Prabhupada, it said, I'm very much pleased at the responsibility you've taken to spread Krishna consciousness in South Africa at such a young age. And I said, well, I guess I'm not in trouble for making the decisions because there was no one to ask. And then he said, I am praying to Krishna that you will have the strength and enthusiasm to carry out this mission. So I may not be much, I may not be qualified, but boy, am I well connected. Prabhupada is praying to Krishna that we will have the strength and enthusiasm to carry this out. But when we surrender to Prabhupada, Prabhupada does that for all of us. When we read the books like Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that we are worshiping him by his intelligence. That is available for everyone. It's just like if I stick the fork in the wall and get a big shock, you go, wow, he really knows how to experience electricity. I don't. If you stick a fork in the wall, you will also get it. Did Prabhupada ever try this? He did as a child. Prabhupada was a Bhai, he was fearless. So the only reason we don't experience something is that we haven't been willing to do the experiment. Of course, people don't believe in spiritual life because they've never seen such a thing. I was in Vrindavan in the early 70s, and I told these boys that in America we have a road called a freeway. And on this freeway, you travel 100 kilometers an hour. There's no cross traffic, no bicycles, no animals. And he yelled for his friend. He says, hey, listen to the story this American made up. And of course, now you have these kind of roads in India. But because they'd never experienced such a thing, their logical conclusion was, because I have not experienced it, it does not exist. But that is not a good logical conclusion. Just because you have not experienced something does not mean it does not exist. So if we're constantly devoted and worship Krishna with love, he gives us the intelligence by which they come to me. This sounds like kind of an interesting thing, but we're not quite sure what to do. It's like the Christians say, you just accept Jesus. Okay, I accept Uttar Pradesh. Does it do me any harm or good? I accept it, but what do we do? You know, we talk about more often, some of them talk about what we believe, we talk about what we do. Just like people talk about investing. And if they just do a single stock pick, they may be taking a big risk. But if they invest in the whole, what is it called? And you invest in the whole index, then you've spread your risk out and your benefit. So we have an index of investment that has 9 different things in it. And remember these carefully. They are Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, and Ātma-vañcakaḥ. Now, we invest in all of these. We do our hearing when we are chanting the names on beads and in kirtan. We do the hearing when we're reading books. We chant when we're chanting on beads and when we're chanting in kirtan and when we're reading books. We engage in the smaranam by remembering these instructions so that our intelligence will become pure and remembering Krishna's pastimes. Padasevanam, we worship the lotus feet of the Lord. Archanam, we worship the deity. We have sevanams, dasyam, service, vandanam, yes, vandanam, prayers, thank you, vandanam, prayers, and sakyam, making friends with the Lord, and ātma-vañcakaḥ, surrendering everything. So some of you may do some of these more than others. Some people do a lot of kirtan in just 16 rounds. Some people do just a few kirtans and they do extra rounds. Some people do lots of preaching. Some people do business. Some people do reading. But we should do a little bit of all of these. Unfortunately, there's a temple program where it allows us the chance to do this. We come in the morning, we see the deity, we chant the names and we hear them. That's why we're not usually checking the internet for things when we're listening to class or during the Mangal Artik or chanting on beats. And we read the books both in class and outside of class to keep our intelligence fresh. The pastimes of Krishna are better than the pastimes of the mundane people in the material world. They try to give it's a perverted reflection that people have a love, but it's nothing like the love of Radha and Krishna. Usually something goes wrong. And so we find that as it's said here that Śiva is instructing Banasura, that we ask not to be engaged in material life, because it is so easy to be engaged in material life because matter is here. But again, it's material life when we put matter at the top and everything else is serving the matter. We put the matter on our altar and we chase that. But as Prabhupada says, the real problem is the sex life, because not many of us does the passing idea come, I think I'll go eat meat, or maybe I'll go to the gambling parlor. But the opposite sex can still seem attractive. But the sooner one pulls himself away, the less reaction he has to get. It's like Prabhupada says, attraction may be there, but we don't contemplate it, and we don't have to act on it. And in Vrindavan, we feel our anarthas are right in front of us, forcing us to do something about them. But we have the processes to do something about us. The instructions are given here in this about how to take to spiritual life instead of material life. And Krishna gives us so many instructions in Bhagavad Gita that if we follow these instructions, no matter who we are, we will become purified. The person who takes the poison becomes sick. The person who takes the nectar becomes better. It doesn't matter who we are. If we engage in material activities, we come contaminated. And if we engage in spiritual activities, Krishna helps us. Even if he has to do a lot of caring of what we lack, if we're constantly devoted, as is explained in these verses, we find we will get the best result out of life. We have to think like with real estate. They say, what is the highest and best use of real estate? It's just like growing vegetables may be good, but do we grow vegetables where we've torn down the old property here? No, the highest and best use is to build the halls and to build the guest houses so people can come. We grow the vegetables in a place a little more remote. So we think, what is the highest and best use of our time? So when it's Mangal Artik, we concentrate on doing that. Many people try to multitask. It's like I tell people, I chant on rounds, I go on the internet, and I drive a car, but I don't do them all at the same time. So we have to concentrate on what we're doing. And there may be a time to do things on the computer or make phone calls. But we start with the spiritual activities so that the things we do, whether we're on the computer or on the phone, don't become material life, but they become a part of our spiritual life. And the main part is, am I offering it to myself, material life? Or material life, we're really offering our mind and senses to the matter, which is a bad offering. Or am I offering my body, mind, and words to Krishna? And we have to contemplate this on a regular basis. Because I know for me, I didn't just decide I will give up material desires and serve Krishna's desires, and the material desires all went away. It's a process. Just like the cell phone and the computer. They need to be recharged on a regular basis. I can't say, oh, I chanted and I ate last week. I don't need to eat or chant now. I did that last week. We need to do them on a regular basis. But by a regular process and doing this with determination, Krishna will help us in spite of how unqualified we may actually be. So thank you for my humble rendering here. I tried to include a few things from Shastra that have been helpful for me and hopefully helpful for others. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections? Yes?
What's a good stock pick?
A good stock pick. Well,
what's a good stock pick?
Okay.
Do you recommend?
The first thing we do in any field, it's like someone says, well, I have this spiritual master over here, and he says this. But the best way to exceed in any of them is you find your own spiritual master and you listen to them. If you're in a school, you listen to that teacher. You get your own doctor. You find a financial advisor who advises you in whatever particular things that you're going to do. And each person's situation is a little different, which is different because spiritually, everybody chants 16 rounds. The anarthas may be different, but the risks are there for everyone. If someone's investing in India, probably easy thing is to put in the Nifty 50 because it's the top 50 companies, and that way you've diversified risk. But the first thing someone should do is find someone to analyze their situation if they're really going to do that. But of course, the best stock pick is in the Krishna stock, because if we give to Krishna, then we are benefited eternally. So we have to remember that even if we're doing a job or we're engaged in some kind of business or things, that we have to designate some of the profit to Krishna, and that's the most important. But before anybody does the spiritual things or invests or engages in medical, find a qualified person to advise you. Pitiable.
Generally, when one dies, he forgets, all about his life and everything. So what does it matter? I mean, once you're dead and you forget, then what's the purpose of all this chanting and reading and all this austerity? Just live your life. When you're going to die, you're going to forget about it anyway.
That's like the person who got drunk last night. So what difference does it make what I did last night? I don't remember it. I'm not responsible. I got in the car, I hit 2 people, but because I don't remember it, I'm not responsible, correct? Is it true? No. So it comes to there. And there's the thing, when someone dies, maybe you make consideration for your children, but you make consideration for your temple. And that way, if you're building equity in things, that it goes to Krishna and it goes to that. But just because we don't remember doesn't mean we're not responsible. Isn't that what the drunk person said who caused the accident? Do they let him go? He goes to jail. And what we take from this life is where we start in the next life. Hopefully we go back to Krishna, but whatever we take with us. Krishna explains that to Arjuna, that Arjuna says, isn't it like it just blows away like the cloud blows away in the wind? And Krishna says, no, you take birth based on what your activities were.
What brings people happiness is that socializing and having fun time. Nobody likes just sitting alone quietly just chanting and performing austerities. And so how do we know that I'll become a dog or a cat next life if I don't follow the rules and regulations? How do we know?
If you follow the rules and regulations, you probably won't become a dog or a cat. But it's pretty obvious that we get what we sow is what we reap, and we look for the things. Somebody thinks it's boring to do the austerities, but they're not an austerity if the reward is high. We think, oh, you tell me I want you to walk to the Loi Bazaar barefoot, and if you do, I'll give you 1 crore of rupees. Now is it an austerity? No, the benefit is so high that it doesn't become an austerity. I wake up very early to do chanting. It seems like an austerity, but socializing with Krishna seems to give me more pleasure than... Now, I like to socialize with people later. I put the first things first. Do chanting on beads, go to Mangalarti, go to class, and then when the time is right, I socialize with people. But then I have something to give, and then the socializing is on a higher level. You hear the things that mundane people talk about, and it doesn't seem to have much juice. It's chewing that dry sugarcane pulp. It sounds good, but when we experience the spiritual connection, we find that then our socializing is even better, is it not? Especially then it's all positive, it's all solution. People talk about so many problems and so many faults in people with no ideas about what is positive. But when we become encouraged in Krishna consciousness, we may not care for certain things, but we promote the most positive things. And we find that we become more happy and joyous and free by doing that. I see the people who don't chant. I saw one guy at Calcutta railway station, and he looked terrible shape. He says, "You want to buy some morphine?" I said, "Do you take it?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Doesn't look like a good idea because you don't look like you're doing well." So for him, he thought that was happiness, but he wasn't doing very well. But it's like that person that thinks, "Hey, I was drunk last night. I'm not responsible for what I don't remember." So we are responsible for what happened. And just like anything else we do, say, why should I go to high school and get good grades? When I'm done with high school, does it matter? But when they go to college, all that record is checked. And so in the same way, all of our record is checked. But the difference is, if we're not a devotee, Yamaraj keeps score, and if we're a devotee, Krishna keeps score. So would you rather have Krishna keep score or Yamaraj? I think I'll stick with Krishna. Does that answer it?
Thank you.
All right. Yes.
You asked for corrections. My mind is expert at finding faults. So my mind is expert at finding faults. It's doing it all the time. Well, you just... hope I don't forget. You quoted... Well, you put two verses together. You put a couple of things together. You said that Krishna says that the mind is very difficult to control, but he says it is possible by constant practice and detachment. You said it's possible by taking shelter of Krishna and the pure devotee, which is also true, but it's not the original quote. You asked for criticism.
That goes along with it. Someone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. There is ekanga bhakti and there is anekangi bhakti. But through them, we can attain God. So if we can attain God through ekangi bhakti, then why should we go for anekangi bhakti that is followed in many institutions, religious institutions?
We start by following the Vaidhi Bhakti. It's like Prabhupada says in one purport, it's a long road from the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Bhakti Yoga. So it's one mistake to try not to move and progress and to increase our love and our attachment, our rati for Krishna, but it's another mistake to jump too far ahead. It's just like the student is in the first standard. To jump from there to try to go into engineering school, he has to do the preliminary things. But it's a process. And in the process, we don't give up the rules and regulations. We try to purify ourselves and improve the love. So it's a process. It's not an either or, it's a process that by practicing on a regular basis, and first we offer food and we chant and we try to add more love as we do it. But it's a lot easier to add the love if we're already doing it. If you found the time to chant 16, 20, or 30 rounds a day, it's a lot easier to find the time to chant them attentively. But if you don't chant at all, then it's going to be hard to find the time to do it. It's just like it would be hard for me to find the time to play cricket properly because I haven't even found the time to play it at all. So first we start. The main thing Prabhupada says, we get people started. He says you go in like a needle and out like a plow. He tells people in the beginning, just come and watch what we do. And then from that they can gradually move forward. And they take guidance from people as to how quickly they can move forward. So these are individual bases. But it's not either or, but it's a continuum. How's that? Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Any other question? Should we quit there? We don't have time to list all of my many faults, so.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Prabhu, as when we are in association of devotees, so we feel surcharged. When we are out of the devotees association, then our mind runs here and there. So even if you try to control, by chanting and other things. But still, we are forced to do something which we are not supposed to do. So can you say something?
Number 1, in that 43rd verse of the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, deliberate spiritual intelligence. We should be very careful that we've deliberated on something before we do it. It's just like when you tore down the old buildings there. You didn't think, well, I wonder what we're going to do now. You had a whole deliberate idea. This building comes down, foundation. You deliberated fully before the action, correct? You didn't just tear a building down and think, what do we do next? So the same way, before we take any action, it's like they say with construction. There's 2 nails of planning before 1 nail of pounding. We have to make sure that our activities, that we consider them well according to Shastra. We ask other people. We can associate with Krishna and Prabhupada by reading books. I have those little boxes that look like a radio that have Prabhupada lectures, and we can talk to other devotees. So we can associate with Krishna and Prabhupada by our devotion. And we take that deliberate. If we're not sure what to do, consult Shastra and consult someone else. What should I do next? So we should be deliberate in our activities. We don't just throw up a building and say, should we put a foundation? We have to be very deliberate in the same way with our spiritual activities. We have to be sure that what I'm doing is the right course of action. And deliberating helps us to do that. Krishna mentioned it, and it works. Hare Krishna. Jai.